Hey guys, this is Darius Komodo Dragon Jesus Vita, here for PokerVIP, making a 4-tabling 100 no limit video on stars. Doing a little bit of an evening session tonight. So far it's going alright, but I haven't been going for too long. So we'll see how this goes. The action's already going, we're folding a deuce 4. And yeah guys, let's have some fun. With the ace 10, we're going to start off with a raise on the button. And I'm just checking this player's fold to 3-bet. It's pretty high over what's getting to be a moderate sample. But I decided, maybe it's not reliable enough to go with the 7-3. Decided to check back a good ace high on the top right on a fairly dry board. It's got a lot of decent turns that could improve me. When I check hands like this back, it's not often with the intention of folding them to a bet. If he wants to win this hand, I'm going to make him put in several streets. And the 8 is actually a really good card for my range. But now I'm in this spot where he likely doesn't have a better ace high. If he has a 9, he's intending on check calling the 9 a majority of the time. So unless he's betting out with pairs under the 9 on the river, I don't think I actually gain a ton from betting. And that's a perfect example right there. That hand loses anyways, so instead of betting, just go for the check down. In position with the 10-9, I flatted pre-flop against Go Pyres here. Flopped what I believe is a double gutter. Yeah, that looks right. When checked to, I'm just going to throw in a small bet. And you guys saw me just check down to 5-6 here. I believe it was a 3-way pot on a lot of overcards run out, so just decided to fold that one. So on the turn with my 9-10, the king is going to hinder quite a bit of my value range, but I'm still going to have stuff like king, queen, pocket 8s, pocket 6s, so there is definitely room for some bluffs. And I think this is a reasonable spot to bluff. There's basically a lot of people are going to have ranges that are kind of split into two categories here. One is going to be your like high card type hands, which is often going to include ace king. The other stuff that goes for the check call is going to be stuff like pairs of 8s, pocket 7s, which I guess hit this river, the weak pairs that don't think they're strong enough to go for the value bet. And I think on the king, we can get the second category to fold there. I think on this river, I want to go large, because if he did hit the king, or if he was slow playing, then I want to maximize value. So we'll go 23 on this river. And we got the call, of course, getting lucky on the river. And it was a slow play with aces, which I'm going to be honest with you guys, I didn't really see that one coming. I decided to take a bet flop check turn line with the 10s. I'm not thrilled about it, but I think that's going to be okay. When he bets $6, I don't really see myself folding this type of hand. I will still have to fold air hands. And he has a jack 5 that he's lipping on the button. So we're just going to make the mental note there that he's going to be playing a lot of hands. Of course, the HUD will tell us that he's been playing 4 out of 5 hands so far, and there is 5 out of 6. I'm also just going to start raising him bigger now that I see he's playing hands like the Jack 5 offsuit, because there's a few different types of limpers. There's the kind of tight passive limper and the loose passive limper. If he shows up with that kind of hand, he's definitely in the loose category. Versus has big biceps here for another 10. This seems close. I do expect his range to be fairly tight, but I think if I'm folding hands like this, then I'm probably folding way too much. Let's see a flop. It's a little bit awkward facing a really small bet against that size of bet with pot size on turn left behind. I don't think we can really peel profitably. And hopefully we get a nice spot to overcall the ace-8 in the top left. Looks like we're going to get it. Flopping nothing but backdoors. Don't think we're going to do too much there. With my pair, with the king-9, I'm just going to try to get to showdown. I think there might be a little bit of value in a bet, but there's also value in calling a bet. And I am just going to go with that route. If he bets river, I will be calling. Oh man. Okay, so he flops 2-pair, checks it back, still has 2-pair on the turn, checks it back, gets counterfeited on the river and bets it. This is going to be a fun night, boys. But we got a couple spots where I'm just folding here. So 8 deuce on the button. We're not going to play that either. Ace 9 is of course wonderful. Got a very loose player in middle position. And yeah, we'll be trying to play this ace 9. Let's see what we can do. Definitely raise if it folds around on the button. Versus a cutoff raise, I think it could do okay as a call. I have a lot of hands on this player, but I don't recall playing against them recently, so must be kind of in the distant past. Anyways, we just get to raise the button and get an absolutely fine result of stealing the blinds. Interesting to see Watson over here. If you guys caught that last hand, he actually underbet bluffed the river for, I think it was like $8 into 30 with 4 high. So I think that's kind of important to notice, because a lot of players, whenever you see somebody throw in an underbet, like a third pot bet or, a quarter pot bet, or, just like something really small, even half pot bets to some extent, the general consensus of people is that, he's probably not bluffing, because if he's bluffing, why wouldn't he go bigger? And so it's important to see that he's actually bluffing with that sizing in at least a spot or two. Maybe all his bets are just going to be tiny, who knows? But since he'll have bluffs, making calls against those small bets are probably going to be really, really profitable, because, pot odds against small bets are incredible. If somebody makes a 1/10 pot size bet, then you just got to win it 1 out of 11 times. Okay, that might, maybe we won't see 1/10 pot size bets, but we'll see some. Ace 10 sees a flop. I think this is an okay flop for a high card ace type hand, especially with the ace of clubs here. Against a player playing lots of hands, I'll happily continue as long as the bet size isn't enormous. And yeah, that does not count as enormous. 6 doesn't really change much, and he snap bets turn. I think at this point we can consider folding a lot of ace high type hands, though I'd probably still be peeling with ace 4, ace 5. Mainly those hands because I'm no longer, considering good kickers on aces to be extremely relevant facing the double barrel. If ace high is going to be good, then it's likely that it's just, ace high versus some sort of missed bluff rather than ace 10 versus ace 9 or something like that. And of course, those ace 4, ace 5 in that spot have draws to a wheel. I decided to flatten my pocket eights versus reg, though I think 3-betting here will absolutely be profitable. I decided to do it because the player in the big blind is playing a lot of hands and is playing pretty passively as well. So I think there's value to be made from them if I do happen to, hit a nice hand. The flop call, I think, will be okay. Check, check on the turn. His range should be really capped here. If I had a weaker hand, I'd be turning it into a bluff, but I think eights will actually win a showdown a fair amount. And there we go. On an ace-queen 4 board, I think it's going to be a board that I have a pretty good advantage on as the preflop raiser. One way I can leverage that is just by making small bets with most hands. And it seems a little bit, counterintuitive to want to be betting 9s on this type of board because you're not really getting called by worse all that often, though it will happen sometimes anytime they have a flush draw or a straight draw, or a pair of 4s, frankly, for that sizing. And of course, better hands continue. But you do get villain to fold out a lot of equity against a hand like 9s whenever he folds. So that's a plus. And the game plan with 9s, of course, is to not fire the turn after being called. But a lot of bluffs with clubs or kings, and of course, value hands that will keep on going. Same type of strategy with the king 9 down here, though of course I have a much better hand. I'm going to go with the check with the jack 10 on this board, though I feel a bet could be pretty good as well with a 10 blocker and with his range being capped to probably not include too many strong aces. It could make a decent spot to turn a pair into a triple barrel bluff. But I decided not to go that route this time. When he checks back, I feel pretty good about my hand. I do think I'll have to call a bet if he bets turn because he could just be taking a lot of bluff lines against my perceived weakness. And I can check one more time and I'll expect to win this one at showdown quite a bit too. I'll be defending all my pairs out of the blinds, though they won't always flop very well. I think it's completely reasonable to just fold this hand on the flop. With the queen 3, it's tempting to actually go for a check raise here because last time this guy flopped 2 pair, he just checked it a bunch of times. But he really doesn't seem to know what he's doing, so I'm not going to try to predict his moves too much and get fancy with hands like Queen 3 here. He's letting me realize some equity by seeing the flop for free whenever I'm in the big blind, and I'll thank him for it. But the times when I have Queen high on the ace high board there, I think I'll just let him have it. Three-way with no heart or clubs, I just elected to check my Queen 10. Interesting. So this player has a 70% fold to 3-bet over an actual decent sample, like 3,000 hands, and he's faced like 81 3-bets. I mean, there's definitely room for error in there. But when I see that type of thing over a reasonable sample, I'm going to try to exploit it by just 3-betting wider. And has big biceps, seems to be liking to 3-bet me whenever I make this 5x versus this guy. And I once again have this. I'm much happier calling with this hand. Still not a crazy good flop. And trying to get this player to fold too much gets me 4-bet, which of course isn't pleasant. But with a hand like that, it leads to a fold. I think checking back on this board with ace queen is very reasonable. In fact, I'm going to check back turn as well. And if he checks to me a third time, I'm going to check it back and not expect to win crazy often, but expect to win a decent amount. If he has basically any pair here, then by betting I don't really get him to fold it, I think, considering the flop and turn play. And I know has big biceps is a decent thinking player. If I happen to be up against ace king, that sucks, but this like triple check range is never really only ace king. And I'll prove myself wrong here. I'll check in and I'll have ace king and we'll lose. But no, it's not only ace king. Yay, I like when things go this way. And so he was planning a check raise on the flop, probably. Because that's a combo draw, boys. Planning a check raise on the flop. Taking advantage of the fact that this board is likely going to hit me pretty well, meaning I should bet it pretty often, and then he can just jam. I like to really take note of those examples because it does seem like a spot where he'll just have ace king a lot of the time, and people will underestimate the showdown value of ace queen. But just remembering that that's happened sometimes too is pretty nice. Five, 4 in the big blind typically won't be defended versus a raise, but hey, this guy keeps on lipping, so we'll see some free flops, maybe. Oh, where's the fun in that? I do think it's worth noting that this player folded to the 5x raise in position. So that's going to lead me to raise him a little bit more liberally when he makes those limps, because if I can take a hand that will have pretty garbage equity seeing a flop, but just turn it into a win say like 70% of the time pre-flop by just going up to $5, I think that'll be a really nice strategy. I will also be opening looser on the button because he's here, but I don't think that's going to include King 3. Not of the offsuit variety anyways. In case deuce is a pretty standard open here, of course we're going to get called. And I think this is actually a much better spot against this player than it would usually be, because I think we'll see a lot of free turns by me just taking the check line here with the way he's been playing. Of course not this time. Ace deuce just goes for the fold. I think that bluffing this player super liberally won't be the best plan, and I think if I decide to take a c-bet line with that ace deuce, then it should be with the intention of firing multiple barrels. And that doesn't seem extremely attractive to me. Let's just see a flop with this one. Ace king in this spot will typically be a 3-bet. It's important to note that we're 130 blinds deep, so I don't think ace king offsuit falls into my stack off range against under the gun. Though it is probably pretty close. I think it'll likely be a spot where ace king is just short a couple percent on equity. This type of board is one that's going to hit his range fairly well, though at this stack depth I expect him to be continuing wider pre-flop, which means he's going to have a few more junky low hands, which will increase my fold equity with a bet. And I'll just slide a table I got going on off screen here. I mean, nothing crazy exciting going on here because I just, I hit a nut flush after calling a couple bets. I do think that the best sizing against check call will likely just be going all in. He's got 72, there's 63 in the pot. And it seems he has snap fold on, so probably folding to any sizing there. To this sizing, I'm going to fold ace king, though if he had made it a smaller sizing, I think we probably have to continue. Otherwise, I'm just folding a heck of a lot of hands there. And let's call in position with a pretty nice suited connector versus a looser than normal player over a small sample, but it's the information I have so far, so let's go with it. And facing a c-bet on this board, I think folding is just going to be best. I'm going to take a quick peek at the opening range from this player. 23% under the gun over my sample, which is significant. He's very loose under the gun, which means we'll definitely be defending hands like King Jack. And of course, the looser he is, the more comfortable I feel about a top pair type hand in this scenario, though of course his range is still uncapped, so he's going to have the better kings, all sets, pocket aces, that kind of stuff. I don't think I'm going to really want to value bet a 9 in this spot, because he could take a bet flop check line with his 10s, jacks, queens, which makes it pretty tough for a 9 to get value. So my betting range here is probably just going to be like kings and better. And because of that, I can go, of course, bluffs. I can go for a little bit of the larger sizing. And I'll have plenty of bluffs here with stuff like 10 jack, queen jack, 8-7. I'm actually not entirely sure about this spot in the top left, up against C-Bet Slayer. I think this is a board that against a big blind I should be checking back a fairly considerable amount. And basically the thought process I go through there is, you know, if I think it's a board that I should be checking a considerable amount, one of the first things I cut out of a betting range are basically ace highs and just hands that are absolute garbage. Which, you know, this falls under the ace high category. And then I contemplate what to do with pairs and semi bluffs and stronger hands. Watson continuing to limp, which is awesome. I'm tightening up my raising range against him just a little bit because has big biceps is being moderately annoying. But since we saw him going to 15 with Jack 9 suited there, frankly that means that I can ship over his $15 raise a hell of a lot, and it should be profitable, because it just means that he's going to be putting that money in with a very, very loose range. Interesting min raise by this player on the turn, takes it down, very nice. Seems to be a little bit of a big pot brewing up in the top left. Toro put in a third pot bet on the flop, I believe, which as the aggressor would be a reasonable line to take on this type of board. And 70 in the pot, 81 in stack. I think you'll see a shove here a lot if he chooses, but instead he chooses to go a hair over half pot. I'm curious what we'll see here. I hope we get to see it. I always like showdowns. And he has queen 10 offsuit, which falls perfectly in line with him being extraordinarily loose. Though maybe that's what's something that we can take away from that, is that he is maybe not super keen on just bluffing off his entire stack, even though I think that was a fair situation to do it in. So now he's got a 40 big blind stack, and he just lost a really big pot where, you know, he got caught bluffing. There's potential for tilt. I don't know if he is or not, but I'm going to go with a flat with the king jack. And there's a couple of reasons for it. One, because of his stack size, it's actually really easy for him, whether he's tilting or not, to just reshove against my hand. And of course, I don't want to call an all-in with King Jack high. Another reason is that, you know, even though he's a little bit loose, King Jack is not going to do crazy good out of position. So being able to keep the pot small is fairly attractive. And once again, because he only has the small stack, if we keep the pot small pre-flop, then we can still potentially get his entire stack post-flop just by throwing in one check raise or using a large bet sizing. Rather than if he was 100 big blinds deep, then, you know, it would take a lot of extra effort to get all the money in if that's something that I wanted to do. I think three-way, floating with the 7-6 will be a little bit optimistic. Once again, being a little bit tight here with the 6-4. I don't even know if that counts as tight, but, you know, I made the fold. Ace-Jack's a pretty wonderful hand on the button. It is fairly well versus a cutoff range or a 3-bet from the blinds, so we're almost certainly going to be playing this one. Use my standard raise sizing on the button, which is a min raise. And let's see if Big Blind wants to play. Nope. I don't expect calling threes to be crazy profitable in this spot, but I think it should be profitable, if at least by a small margin. There's also a potentially weaker player in the big blind who could add some value to the pot. So calling lets him in as well. Of course, sometimes gets squeezed by a small blind, and I have a very straightforward game plan after this. If the original raiser calls, I will overcall. I think the odds would be too good to fold. And if he folds, then I'll fold, because then suddenly the odds aren't nearly as good. Both direct odds and implied odds. Just taking a quick peek at c-bet stats from NutFit, and he doesn't seem crazy aggressive. So I think the ace-8 into that bet sizing three-way just falls into the fold category. These games are surprisingly juicy right now. I mean, of course, there's a few regs going around. We've got a lot of very, very splashy players. I like it. And we'll be seeing a flop. Queen 10 flops a pair. That's very nice. And blind versus blind, I think ace-8 offsuit is a great open. Looks like we're facing a fairly standard c-bet on this type of board. I would expect this to be done with either all or nearly all of this player's opening range. And a lead on the turn is very tempting. I'm not going to do it, essentially because I think this is a spot where I won't, and I don't think a lot of players will be leading bluffs. And if I'm not leading bluffs, then it doesn't make sense to lead value hands, because then villain can just play really, really well against it and just fold. And he'll definitely have some bluffs on the turn and some value bets. So, you know, we let him take that shot. Up against this player who just lost his stack and rebought. Calling down ace-3 suited seems a little thin here. But I think we should be calling him down pretty light. And after I c-bet this flop on this run out, I think I have basically no fold equity with my queen-jack. I did c-bet this flop pretty large. I think when he checks river, we'll just see an ace a bunch. Maybe we see a give up similar to my hand, but in that case, we'll just, you know, chop the pot. Great. Oh, I seem to have lost a table. Okay. Guys, let's get rid of this table. Luckily, I have one going on the side. And tile tables. There we go. Problem solved. I was just saying that ace-jack is a wonderful hand on the button. Ace-queen is, of course, better. Just checking out this player's 4-bet stats. They seem to be pretty tight. Getting 4-bet at this stack depth with ace-queen offsuit is mildly unpleasant, so the fact that he doesn't do it very often, I think, is a good sign, and, you know, a good indicator that, hell yeah, let's throw in the 3-bet with ace-queen. I mean, I guess it falls under the standard 3-bet category anyways, but it's always nice to check stuff like that, because any little type of edge you can gain from your added info is, well, it's going to be an added edge. Looks like we're just taking down the blinds with the 4s. And ace-8 will make a pretty nice defend in the big blind, as long as no 3-bet comes in from small blind. Calling queen 5 here is moderately tempting because this player has never thrown in a limp re-raise. So this is basically the equivalent scenario to this guy raising 3.5x, this guy calling, and I overcall in the blinds, getting decent odds. Queen 5 is a little bit on the weaker side. Of course, we would have flopped a dream. And the fact that we're not closing the action there, although him limp re-raising is unlikely, I do think that that hinders our play there a little bit. On this 3-4-5 board, I think a bet is reasonable. Planning to just bet this flop once a majority of the time is typically a pretty poor plan, because out of all the flops, ace highs love this one the most. So I am going to bet, but my intention would be to keep on barreling on basically any non-ace overcards. I guess the board was 3-4-5, maybe not 6 or 7 as well. Well, those are overcards that are very well connected with the board. But stuff like 8, 9, 10, Queen, Jack, King are all cards that this player won't often have in the range, and I'll be able to barrel them, I think, quite successfully, unless we're up against a fairly strong part of his range. I'm going to go with a flat with the 10-8, though I actually do think it's close. I would almost certainly be raising hands like ace-8, king-8. And looks like he's just letting me get to the river cheaply, and I think that's awfully nice of him. With this type of hand, I don't have a massive need to inflate the size of the pot. If his 3-bet percentage is 2.2, I'm just folding my ace-queen. And although he might not have a lot of bluffs, guys, for 1/6 of the pot, we're not folding an 8 either. And he has queens, which is basically ludicrous any way you think about it. That being said, I guess we got to thank him for making that pot so cheap. Got a couple queen jacks here, both very nice hands. Step 1 will be to raise both of them. On this very dry, very low 5 deuce a deuce board, I'm going to start off with a small bet and continue on a lot of turns. Even though it's a very small bet, since this board is so difficult to connect with, it should get a lot of fold equity. The 7, I think, is better than a lot of other overcards. Anytime he's floating here with just like overcard type hands, it's going to be mostly your broadways, maybe something 9, 10 at the lowest majority of the time. I'm going to fire a second barrel, and if called, I'll definitely consider throwing in a third. And then we got some nice hands. And I'm really going to raises on both fronts. I'm going to go with 1 flat and 1 3-bet. Nuts fits squeezes. He squeezes moderately often. Once he makes it 16 here over a $3 raise, I'm never going to be flatting. I'm either going to be 4-betting or shoving or folding. And this hand is going to fall into one of the first 2 categories. I don't think it makes a huge difference which way you go, because like if I'm 4-betting, I'm 4-betting to like 35 anyways, and that leaves me pot committed with so many of my hands. So let's just raise all in. And I'll take a small bet strategy with the queens on the ace-6-3 board. And guys, we just had a nice king, a nice queens. Hopefully we're going to win a 9-8 here. So after these 2 hands on the top play out, I think I'm going to call it a video. I'm going to be betting for value for a second time with the 9-8. He can have some better hands in a check call range, but I think it's unlikely on that board texture, blind versus blind. And ace-4, as much as I love barreling this type of flop, this guy is much looser than average, so we could potentially get quite a bit of action from him. And Verkus over here, his range will likely be pretty pair heavy and include some Broadway with kings, so even though it's kind of dry, I don't expect the most fold equity. Once it checks around, though, I don't think this player will have 8s plus very often. So I think I can take the bet there. And when I get check raised with deuce 4, we're going to be out of there. All right, guys, I'm going to call it a video here. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. As always, post comments, questions, stuff like that below the stream, or sorry, below the video, in the comment section below the video. And I try to respond to all of those, so hopefully we can have a nice chat. Once again, this has been Darius Komodo Dragon Cheese's Vita for PokerVIP. See you next time.